I don't know about you, but I am full. Oh, it's delicious. Very good. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, as he came down from the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. Exodus 34:29. Many important things happened on Mount Sinai that are worth remembering. It's been 3 months since Moses has led the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, with the Egyptians hot on their heels. But God has shown himself faithful. He brought 10 plagues upon the land so that finally Pharaoh was willing to let the people go, but not before Aaron's staff changed to a snake before their eyes. The Nile ran red with blood, gnats and locusts covered the land. Blackness descended on the land at noon. Hail destroyed most of the crops. Boils covered their bodies, and finally the firstborn in each family died. So Pharaoh was finally willing to let them go. However, seeing them actually leave the land where they had been slaves for so many years must have infuriated Pharaoh, because he had decided that he made a terrible mistake. After all, how would he get his great city finished without them? Who would make the bricks? Who would respond to his every wish? He wanted these people back, and so he and all his armies pursued them. Now imagine that you are the children of Israel. You've lived as slaves for many years under cruel taskmasters, ones who took away the straw and forced you to make even more bricks. You have seen firsthand the power of God as he sent powerful plagues to the Egyptians. And then you hear the summons from Moses in the middle of the night. He brings the word of the Lord. It's time to go. Excitement must surely be running through the camp. We're leaving. We're finally leaving, free from the bondage of slavery. But not long after they leave Egypt, they see them coming, the Egyptians. Horses, chariots, men with weapons. The Red Sea was before them. They were trapped, and they did what many of us do in the midst of trials. They complained. Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone, and we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in this wilderness. Once again, God intervened on their behalf. It's a familiar story from Sunday school. Moses stretched forth his rod, and the Red Sea parted. The children of Israel walked across on dry land. Don't miss that. They didn't go through the mud. They walked on dry land. God doesn't do things halfway. These memories should have been vivid to them. And 3 months after crossing the Red Sea, they find themselves in the valley of Sinai at the foot of a great mountain. 3 months. That's like summer vacation from school. Not very long, but evidently it was long enough for them to forget the provision of God as he brought them out of Egypt, because what happened here at the foot of Mount Sinai is worth remembering. Many people think of Moses going up Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments from God, bringing those tablets down to the people, breaking the tablets in anger, and going back up the mountain to get the tablets again. However, if you read carefully Exodus chapters 19 through 34, you will find that Moses actually went up and down Mount Sinai 7 times. I'm going to give you a summary because there are important things that happened each time. The first time God called Moses to come up to the mountain to talk to him, God gave Moses a message for his children. He wants them to remember. And so he told Moses to go down and say, "You yourselves have seen what I, God, did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." What a wonderful promise God is making to his people. If they obey and keep God's covenant, they shall be God's treasured possession among all peoples. They would be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So Moses descended the mountain to tell the people what God had said. And how did the people answer him? They said, "All that the Lord has said, we will do." This becomes a familiar refrain. The second time Moses went up the mountain, he reported their response. The people said to God, "All that you command, we will do." And then God gave Moses another message. "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments and be ready for the third day. For on the third day I will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people, and you shall set limits for the people all around, saying, 'Take care not to go into the mountain or touch the edge of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch it, but he shall be stoned or shot. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they shall come up the mountain." But they're to wait on it. They're to wait for the trumpet blast. So Moses descended the mountain, and he told the people to be ready, for God was coming down on the third day to speak to them. So on the third day they were ready. They assembled at the foot of Mount Sinai, and suddenly all the people heard thunder and saw lightning. A thick cloud appeared on the mountain, and they heard a very loud trumpet blast. And they were supposed to go up the mountain to meet with God, but the people were terrified. Moses encouraged them to come out of the camp to meet God, and they gathered at the foot of the mountain. And in the midst of all this noise, the whole mountain was wrapped in smoke because God had descended on it in fire. And then the ground began to shake. This is not a little shake. It's something more like a 7.3 earthquake. The whole mountain trembled greatly, and the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. And Moses spoke, and God answered him in thunder. And when God came down to the top of the mountain, he called Moses to come up, and Moses obeyed. The people were afraid. They cowered at the foot of the mountain because they were afraid to go up into the mountain and hear God. Moses 20 begins by implying that Moses made his third trip up the mountain, and while there, God told Moses to go down and warn the people again. This time he's saying, do not come up the mountain. Don't even touch it. But bring Aaron up the mountain with you. And Aaron accompanies Moses on the fourth trip up the mountain. And there God spoke to Moses and gave him what we know as the Ten Commandments. And as God spoke to Moses, The people could see flashes of lightning and smoke on the mountain. They could hear the thunder and the sound of trumpets. And again, they were terrified. They stood as far away from the mountain as they could. And they begged Moses not to let God speak directly to them, for they feared they would die. It's like, please tell him not to speak to us. Let him speak to you, and then you tell us what he says. Moses was not afraid to talk with God, and so he drew near to the thick darkness where God was. And while Moses was on the mountaintop, God gave him specific laws about altars and slaves and making restitution and social justice and the Sabbath and the festivals. And then God promised that he would take them to the land of Canaan, the promised land, guarding them on their way and protecting them. Now, Moses went back down the mountain, and in Exodus 24:1, God said to Moses, he's down the mountain again, he says, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron. This time bring Nadab and Abihu and 70 of the elders of Israel, but worship from afar. Moses alone shall come near to the Lord, but the others shall not come near, and the people shall not come up with him. And this would be Moses' 5th trip up the mountain. So he went up the mountain, he built an altar, he offered a sacrifice on behalf of the people. He read to them the book of the covenant and told the people all that God had said. He explained all the rules to them, and once again they answered, all of the words that the Lord has spoken, we will do. Sound familiar? How many times have we said that? And then we didn't. We're not much different than the children of Israel. Once again, God tells Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, that I may give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commandment which I have written for their instructions. Notice the words, and wait there. The 6th time when Moses went up the mountain, he explained to the people that he was going to leave, and he was going to leave Aaron and Hur in charge. Not H-E-R, H-U-R, Aaron and Hur. If there were any disputes, the people were to go to them. So Moses went up the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. And the word tells us the glory of the Lord dwelt on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. Remember, God told Moses to come up and wait. How difficult would it be to wait in the cloud for 6 days? Perhaps he misunderstood God. About the 4th day, he'd be thinking, I thought he was going to come and talk to me. What's going on? On the 5th day, maybe I misunderstood him. Maybe I wasn't supposed to come up here yet. But God was waiting for the right time, his time. Perhaps then God would be ready to speak to him. Has God ever told you to wait? I remember a time in my life when God told me to wait. You know, at the time of going through this, I never once thought, oh, God just wants me to wait. I just wanted an answer to my prayer, and I wanted it now. I didn't want to wait. My husband and I had been married for 2 years, and we decided to start a family. But 4 years later, no prospects of a baby. Those were very dark years. Perhaps that's what those 6 days on the mountain were like with Moses. Dark, lonely. I began to doubt if God was really there. Why wouldn't he answer me? You know, God has a purpose when he tells his children to wait. And we may never know why he wants us to wait. But I love that verse in Habakkuk. But God knows. He knows it all from beginning to end. And I know that when I was going through that very dark day, I often look back on those years and I think, I wish I could do those again. I'd like to do-over, God, so that I could respond correctly, because I didn't. I was angry. I was bitter. Everybody else my age was getting pregnant. I wasn't. I thought, God has just left me. And I remember almost audibly saying to God, if you can't answer the big thing in my life, I don't care about the little things. And I quit praying. Oh, I went to church. I put on the act. I knew all the right words to say. I knew how to pretend. But I wasn't waiting on God. And I missed 4 years of tremendous blessing in waiting on God. And I promised after that period was over and I could look back on that I would never demand God's answer now. That I would try my best to wait on God when it was his time. So, perhaps Moses needed to quiet himself before the Lord in order to receive the important information that God was going to give him. Of course, hindsight is 20/20. And looking over those dark days in my life, I now know that God was teaching me to wait on him. And I learned many lessons from those 4 years of waiting for his answer. God did answer me. He gave me 2 beautiful children, but not before I learned that those gifts are from his hand and his timing. His timing is always right, not ours. On the 7th day, God spoke to Moses. The people could see the top of the mountain where their leader Moses was, and it was like a devouring fire. And there Moses stayed for 40 days and 40 nights. And the people began to worry about him. Why is he staying so long? What's happening to him? Perhaps he's dead. But he was very much alive and in the very presence of God. During those 40 days and 40 nights, God gave Moses specific instructions to build that amazing sanctuary where God would dwell with them on earth. And during those days of instructions, Moses neither ate nor drank anything because God was sufficient for him. When God had finished giving Moses all the instructions, he gave him the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the very finger of God. And he was ready to go back down the mountain to his people and tell them all that God had said. Remember, these were the people who twice said, all the words of the Lord has spoken, we will do. Surely they will be excited to hear all that Moses has to tell them. And you've probably heard the old saying, when the cat's away, the mice will play. Moses delivered the bad news. God delivered the bad news to Moses before it went down. He told him that things were not going to be well at the foot of the mountain. In fact, the people had corrupted themselves. They had fashioned a golden calf, worshipped the calf, called it their God. They even attributed their safe departure from Egypt to the workings of this golden calf. Can you believe it? All the things that you say, we will do. And then they worshipped a golden calf. It's really difficult to imagine how in such a short time, 40 days, 40 nights, they had forgotten the amazing things they had seen from the hands of the one true God. Just a few days without their leader, and they were ready to give it all up and follow a false god. We may be just as guilty. Our gods may not be fashioned of gold. Our gods may be material possessions, a prestigious job, a spacious home in the right neighborhood, or anything else that turns our eyes away from the one true God. When life is difficult, we often pray, Lord, anything you say, I will do. And then we forget. And before long, we're doing our own thing, going our own way. Well, Moses saw what had happened, and he went back up the mountain and he begged God for mercy on behalf of his people. And God answered his request. But Moses was furious with the people when he went down the mountain and saw all that. It was truly a sad day. They suffered a great consequence for their sin, because Moses commanded the sons of Levi, put your sword on your side, each of you, and go to and from gate to gate throughout the camp, and each of you kill his brother and his companion and his neighbor. That's a pretty stiff punishment, isn't it? Does that tell us how God sees the worship of an idol? He hates that. That was his first command. Have no other gods besides me. And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses. And that day about 3,000 men of the people fell. And Moses said, today you have been ordained for the service of the Lord, each one at the cost of his son and his brother, so that he might bestow a blessing upon you this day. That is really difficult circumstances, consequences of their sin. It's hard for us to imagine that. But God is a just God. He is righteous. That means he does what is right. And he hates sin. And he will punish sin. So the last time that Moses went back up the mountain, he went to make atonement for the people and to intercede for them. And what happened on Mount Sinai between Moses and God is an amazing example to us of what it really means to worship God. Max Lucado explains it beautifully in a book called It's Not About Me. And I want to share this with you. I love this section of his book. He writes, show me your glory, Lord, Moses begs. Forget the bank. He wants to see Fort Knox. He needs a walk in the vault of God's wealth. This is the prayer of Moses, and God answers it. He places his servant in the cleft of the rock, telling Moses, you cannot see my face, for no man shall see me and live. I will cover you with my hand while I pass by, and then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. And so Moses, cowering beneath the umbrella of God's palm, waits. Surely with face bowed, eyes covered, and pulse racing until God gives the signal. When his hand lifts, Moses' eyes do the same and catch a distant, disappearing glance of the back parts of Moses. The heart and center of the Maker is too much for Moses to bear. A fading glimpse will have to do. I'm seeing the long gray hair of Moses wind-whipped forward and his leathery hand grabbing a rock in the wall lest he fall. And as the dust settles and his locks rest again on his shoulders, we see the impact. His face. It's gleaming, bright as if backlit by 1,000 torches. but unknown to Moses, but undeniable to the Hebrews is his shimmering face. When he descended the mountain, the sons of Israel could not look intently at the face of Moses because of the glory of his face. Such a sighting can change you forever. What happens when you worship God? Does the experience change you? We long for that transforming experience of worship, but we aren't sure how it happens. It seems mystical, almost magical. I assure you, worship isn't magical, but then magic isn't magic either. So let me take you backstage and let you watch as the magician tucks the rabbits up his sleeve. One of the keys to worship is found in 2 Corinthians 3:18. This is my favorite verse in the whole Bible. I like a lot, but I love this. And we're going to kind of unpack this verse. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. The first phrase of that verse is actually referring to the events on Mount Sinai. When Moses came down from the mountain after his encounter with the glory of God, he had to put a veil over his face because the people could not look at him for the brightness of his face. But 2 Corinthians 3:18 tells us that we do not have to veil our faces. We want the world to see the brightness we reflect when we have spent time with the Lord. The verse goes on to say that we are beholding the glory of the Lord. Just as Moses did on the mountain, we too can behold his glory. When we behold something, we fix our eyes upon it. It's not a casual glance, but we see with attention, we observe with care. So when we set aside time to fix our eyes on Jesus, to pay close attention, to observe with care all that he is and all that he's done, we are beholding his glory. As we behold, we are being transformed into the same image. We're becoming like Christ. The Greek word for metamorphosis comes from the word transformation. Metamorphosis is that amazing process of nature that changes caterpillars into butterflies. The Greek word means to be changed into another form, but the change, and this is so important, it comes from within. When the caterpillar spins his cocoon, something happens on the inside of this small creature. His very cell structure changes. The changes that take place on the outside are the normal expression of the nature on the inside. Warren Wiersbe, who I'm sad to say died just this last Thursday, great theologian, he wrote, "You would never produce a butterfly by pinning wings on worm. The changes must come from within." When you pin wings on worm, that's masquerade. And the verses in Romans 12, 1 and 2 says, "Be not conformed." That's the word masquerade. Be not conformed to this world. Don't take on the outer look of this world, but be ye transformed from the inside out by the renewing of your mind. That's just a wonderful verse that reminds us what it means to be transformed. And that verse in 2 Corinthians says, let me find it. We all with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image. It's amazing. The Living Bible translates that verse like this: but we Christians have no veil over our faces. We can be mirrors that brightly reflect the glory of the Lord. And as the Spirit of the Lord works within us, we become more and more like Him. As we behold, focusing our attention on Him, the glory of the Lord, we reflect His glory, just as Moses did on Mount Sinai. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, as he came down from the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone, because he had been talking with God. Beholding led to becoming. Becoming led to reflecting. Earlier we talked about we are called to be. We are called to be servants of the living God. We spend time beholding, and that leads to becoming, and becoming leads to reflecting. People should be able to see that we have spent time with the Lord. It takes time. We always seem to be in a hurry. In order to truly behold, we must stop our busyness and take time to focus our attention on Christ. In 1882, William D. Longstaff wrote the words that we sang just a few minutes ago. And listen to the words of just the beginning. Take time to be holy. The world rushes on. Spend much time in secret with Jesus alone. By looking, beholding Jesus, like Him thou shalt be. Thy friends in thy conduct His likeness will see. Beholding the glory of the Lord should change us forever. Have you had a Mount Sinai experience? Can people tell that you have spent time with the Lord? Is your countenance glowing? Are you becoming more like Him every day? Let's pray. Lord, that is our desire, to be more like You. Lord, that everything that You bring into our lives, that we would be conformed to the image of God. And Lord, that when it's difficult for us, that You would help us to wait. When we don't see those answers right away, that You will say, wait for it. I am working. And I just pray that as these ladies go from here, that they will not forget to spend time in secret with You, so that Your glory will be reflected in all that we do and say. And we'll praise You in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.